So, we don't need the toilet flush.
Welcome to the Studios.
Today we're going to talk about some road tubeless. Lance, you ride road tubeless?
I ride road tubeless, and I love it, and I wish all the people around me would ride tubeless so that I would quit having to help them change their flats.
We want to run through some pros and cons with you as to why you might want to consider or not consider getting road tubeless, and we wanted to help you make that decision. So,
Tubeless has been the thing in the mountain bike industry for years. It is also a big thing in gravel racing or gravel riding, in cyclocross. It's all that is very big. It's moving towards the road, and we're trying to figure out why.
Gotcha.
Not everybody is jumping on the bandwagon.
Now, you mentioned mountain biking, you mentioned gravel. Gravel is still, we'll call it relatively new, but for mountain biking, how long have you been riding tubeless?
Probably the last 5 years.
I've been riding tubeless for almost a decade now. I wanted to do something on the road, but it just wasn't the right time until, I'm going to say, about 2 years ago.
I think you're about right.
So, what made you jump over to tubeless?
When I had fewer and fewer flats on my gravel rides and my mountain bike rides, I really wanted to switch over on my road bike, but some wheel rims and tires just didn't play very well together.
Exactly.
And so that kind of kept me from jumping on the bandwagon,
Exactly.
but that's changing.
Yep, and I've been out on so many rides up to that point before I made the decision with so many people that were riding road tubeless, and it just seemed like it was more of a hassle than it was worth. They were still getting flats all the time. There was sealant spraying everywhere over their entire bike. It was just a bloody mess trying to get everything cleaned up. They're still having to take the wheel off, put a tube in there, boot it, and it's just, again, it was a mess that took twice as long to change as opposed to a tube. So I'm like, I'm just going to stick to changing tubes.
So what's the point? What are the pros of going with tubeless tires on the road?
They finally got the wheels and the tires to start playing nicely together, and they started coming out with tubeless specific tires that were mounting to wheels that were built to be tubeless specific, and the next thing you know, the world's all aligned, and all of a sudden we've got a system that works. I switched over 2 years ago, and in that 2 year time period, I've probably ridden outside, just say on the road, maybe about 10,000 miles. Right?
Yep.
And I usually ride 8,000 to 10,000 miles a year, but a good chunk of that's going to be road. And in that 10,000 miles, I've had to change 2 flats. And
so hardly any.
One of them was a big slit in a tire that I had to change, and that was just because I hit something that I didn't see, and that's going to happen. I'm not saying that you're never going to get a flat tire again if you switch over to tubeless. The other flat that I got was a puncture, and the reason why I flatted, because I'm an idiot and I forgot to add more sealant to my tire, and it just wasn't going to seal itself, and we were in a situation where I had to put a tube in there.
I've had to do the walk of shame before for not having enough sealant in there. But so many fewer issues and so many fewer flats by having tubeless on your road.
So Lance, before we get into all the pros of riding with a tubeless setup, let's talk about tubes in general. What are some of the pros that you can think of for staying tubed?
It's less messy.
It's absolutely less messy. It's something that once you learn how to do it, it's a skill set that you can repeat over and over and over again for those that don't want to delve into the land of tubeless that might seem a little bit scary to them.
Right.
You're probably not going to want to go tubeless if your wheel set and the tires that you have are not compatible.
That's correct.
There's still a lot of wheels out there on the road that are out there putting in lots and lots of miles that are not really going to be tubeless specific. And if you don't have the wherewithal to get some new wheels, or you just want to wait until those things wear out, then it's probably not in your best interest to think about switching over to tubeless just yet.
Jake and I ride like 10,000 miles a year. If you're somebody that rides 500 miles a year or less than 1,000 miles a year and you don't get that many flats, it might not be worth the hassle of switching over, because you might need new rims and new tires and sealant, but you'll get fewer flats. I will say that.
So going back to the cons of riding with tubes, though, this happens to all of us. We've all been there. If you ride at all, you're going to deal with the flat at some point in time. So some of the cons are going to be
pinch flats.
Pinch flats.
Any types of flats.
Yep, flatting because of glass and little pieces of wire, and thorns, and all that other stuff. That stuff is just going to be the bane of your existence, and that's just what you're going to have to live with.
Small puncture flats, like a piece of glass or a piece of wire, just like you said, that stuff goes away with tubeless.
Even if you if you're riding tubeless and you get a flat and that stuff still manages to stay inside the tire, you don't have to worry about it.
It still seals up.
Seals up, you're good to go.
Yeah.
Some other cons of riding with tubes would be greater rotational weight.
Yep. So it's harder to get up to speed. That's not a big deal for everybody, but if you're racing bikes, it can be.
Yep.
So
you generally have to ride a higher tire pressure.
Correct.
So you're not going to have as compliant or comfortable as a ride.
Correct.
So if you're doing long rides and you're really into the endurance stuff, you're just not going to have as comfortable of a ride.
Right.
Your rolling resistance isn't going to be as good, and if you ride in places like we do where there's a lot of chip seal on the road, it's just going to be bouncing around and you're going to lose a little bit of that rolling resistance and you're not going to go quite as fast.
Correct. Tubeless pros, there's 5 things that really make a difference with riding tubeless on the road. One is, we just talked about,
fewer flats.
Fewer flats.
Absolutely.
Hallelujah.
That's the driving reason why you go to this. You know, let's just talk about fewer flats. Not only is it just less time on the side of the road, think about how much that adds up to over the course of a year.
Yeah, it adds up.
So when you're talking about maybe somebody who rides 5, 10,000 miles, you're probably going to deal with anywhere from 5 to 15 flats a year.
Correct.
Every single time you pull over to change a flat, if you're super speedy, you're still spending 5 to 10 minutes changing that flat. You're going to probably have a CO2 cartridge with you that you're going to have to change out. You're going to have to change out the tube.
Yep.
Now, you could be that person that does carry a little hand pump with you, and you're going to sit there and you're going to pump that thing up for 10 minutes, 200 pumps in there to get up to PSI. There's going to be some of those people out there that like to put their patch on their tube. But,
right.
You know, that's just that person that's going to be out there perpetually changing tires. But you know, for most people, it's a one and done thing. You're going to CO2 it, you're going to tube it, and those two things right there is what, $8, $10?
Something like that. And you're going to flat. If you're going to be riding on the road, you're going to flat at some point.
Let's just call it $10 for a simple number. Then you round that up to 10 times a year. You're looking at $100 just changing flat tires. And then you multiply the amount of time that you're sitting out there. It's not worth it.
Correct.
Spend a few extra bucks to upgrade to the tubeless setup. I think you're going to be spending less.
Yes.
And then you're not going to be standing on the side of the road.
Yes.
Who out there doesn't want to do that?
No, right, you're right. And every time I'm riding with somebody who is riding on tubes and they get a flat, you can't help but say, why aren't you tubeless yet?
Yep, yeah.
But then I don't want to be a jerk, even though I'm a jerk. Am I? Yeah, I'm being a jerk.
Okay.
The second thing is that tubeless tires can be faster because there is less rolling resistance with these tires. They get up to speed quicker because they have less rotational mass. You don't have the weight of that tube in there, and so you get less rotational mass. You can get up to speed quicker. That's important for racers.
Yes, yes.
The next thing, the tubeless system as a whole can be lighter.
Yep.
Without that tube. That can be debatable.
Yeah, because you are going to deal with a tire that's probably going to be a little bit heavier. A lot of circumstances, you can go out and buy some tubed tires that are quite light.
Yeah.
The tubeless are going to be a little bit heavier because they're going to have a little bit more protection built into them.
Thicker sidewalls.
Exactly. You're also going to have to put sealant in there.
Yep.
And you're also going to have to put a valve in there.
Yeah.
So a tubeless specific valve, and those can be a little bit more meaty than your traditional valve that comes in a tube. So
right.
That's something to take into consideration.
But the second best reason to go tubeless, other than fewer flats.
What's that?
More comfortable ride. You can ride lower pressure. I used to ride my tires at 110 PSI, and it's like riding on freaking concrete. It's like riding on the rim. With my tubeless tires, I ride at 60 PSI. Now, granted, that's a little bit lower than the manufacturer's recommendation, but I've been riding and racing on 60 PSI for the last year, and my gosh, it just smooths out the road.
It does. I personally ride at 80 PSI. I stick to the manufacturer's suggested PSI, and that's not just because I'm following the rules. It's because I've played with lower PSIs, and I just feel like it's a little bit more compliant. I'm also a little bit heavier than you are, but
barely.
Barely.
I'm on my way up.
Uh-oh. Okay, so with all the pros of tubeless, there's going to be some cons, and these are some things that you probably need to be aware of so that you can have a pleasurable experience.
Correct.
What's the first one, Lance?
Setting them up for the first time can be a pain. Quite often, people will bring their tires and rims or wheels to us to help them set up because we've done it hundreds of times, but that doesn't help you out there on YouTube land. It can just be difficult. One of the things, oftentimes, to get the tire to seat on the rim, you kind of need a compressor, an air compressor. But if you remove the valve stem, or the valve core from the stem, and you put your air compressor right up there and blast it, it will pop that tire on the rim and it helps. But not everybody has an air compressor at home or access to one.
So there's a couple things that you can do there. They do make specific floor pumps that have an air canister built into it. You build up the pressure and then you hit the button and it will do the same thing as an air compressor. So there's that. In a pinch, you could possibly even use a CO2 cartridge. I've actually done that before in the past because the air hits the tube a lot faster than a traditional floor pump.
And it like blows up the tire and it pops it on the rim.
Yeah, and not all tubeless tires are created equally or the same. Some of them do seat a lot better, a lot easier. We've had tremendous luck with the Pirelli P0s and the Centranos. Their tubeless setup is pretty fantastic. These guys right here.
These Pirelli tires, they've treated us really well.
Continental's GP5000 tubeless have been fantastic as well in terms of their all of the benefits that come with those. However, we've come to find that those don't play quite as nice with a lot of the different wheel manufacturers out there. You can get them on, but some people have reported back, and I've actually experienced it myself, that they're a lot more difficult to get set up on the wheel itself.
I have a harder time getting these on my rims than these, and I ride head wheels.
Yeah. Those tend to set up with the air compressor decently well. I find that these jump on better too.
Correct.
So there's
we've had better luck with the
Pirellis. All right, here's another con. With the tubeless setup, you need a sealant in there, right?
Correct.
So we've got a couple different sealants that we have here. This one's made by Muck-Off. I've personally never tried this before, but I've had quite a few people that have spoke highly of it. That's why we carry it here at the lab. We've got Stands, which has been around forever and a day. I've used this for many, many years in my mountain bike setup.
Yep.
And I actually use it in road setup as well. And then we've got the Orange Seal Endurance as well. All three of these reportedly work really well. My most experience personally is with these two guys, and I tend to gravitate towards the Orange Seal the most.
I've had better luck with the Orange Seal Endurance formula. It seems to have like bigger particles in it, so stuff seals faster.
Yeah. So with this stuff though, it's not a one and done thing. You don't just put it in and forget it and then you just ride it until the wheel falls off. You have to actually put more of this in there every so often because the sealant itself will actually dry up. And sometimes if you get a puncture and a little bit of it squirts out, that's just a little bit less that's in there. So eventually when it dries up, you're gonna get a puncture, and if there's nothing there to seal up the hole, then you're gonna be sitting there putting a tube in, or you're gonna be dealing with a flat. So you have to remember to put some of this stuff in. I generally, for me, I try and put it in about every 3 months. But what I'll notice is...
I forget all the time.
The telltale sign though is like when you're riding consistently, you put some air in your tires, and for me, like I said, I put in 80 PSI, and I come back the next day and I test it or check it and start to put some more air in there, and I notice that it's at 60 PSI or 50 PSI. I see that it's actually seeping out a little bit of air. That tells me that I need to add a little bit more sealant. So I'll just toss an ounce in there and spin it up, let it seal all those cracks and crevices, and then I'll get back to my riding and I'll come back and it'll be within that 75 to 80 PSI, and I know that I'm good.
Correct.
So.
One of the other cons is because you are dealing with these sealants, it is very messy, or it can be messy. And so you have to be kind of aware of that, especially if you get a flat on the road. It will spray sealant to fill the hole, and that can coat your frame, your jersey, your chamois, your drive chain.
There's some little tricks that you can use to add it in there so that it's not making as much of a mess when you're actually setting it up. So Lance mentioned before, you got to take out that little valve core.
You take off the valve core.
That comes out. Stance has these little bottles right here, and these things work fantastic. We actually keep these around in the lab so that we can actually fill tires up, because that little end on that bottle fits nicely over that, and you just squirt it in there and you're good to go.
There's sealant in there, so I'm not going to squirt it.
The Orange Endurance seal comes with this little guy right here. I've come to find that it's a little bit messier, but it still works. But we still just keep these guys laying around because it's so easy. You know, it's 2 ounces, you fill it up, however many ounces you need, and then you just put that over your stem and squirt it in, you're good to go.
This is just a Stan's ball that I've torn the label off of. But yeah, that's an easy way to add the sealant.
One other thing while you got it out, this little guy right here is called your valve core, the thing that comes out of the actual valve itself. That will be something that you're always putting air in, and you've got, you know, a passage that'll go through, and it's really easy for the sealant to get up in there, and it's very easy to get those guys clogged up. So
these things get clogged up.
And you can clean them up. You can use like a solvent or a rubbing alcohol or something like that to clean them out, but it might not be a bad idea to take that out every once in a while. Or if you've got a friend that's still out there riding tubes and they're a one and done with their tube, you can actually snag the valve core out of their tube and put it in yours, and you'd be good to go.
I change these valve cores on occasion when they're having trouble, when they get too gummed up.
So if we're missing anything, toss it in comments.
Yeah, please.
We love your comments, by the way. They're fantastic.
Yeah, except all you haters.
If we're missing something as a pro or a con, we'd love to hear it. And what's nice is when you comment and you have some good constructive criticism and there are some things that you want to add, other people can read that and they can learn a little bit more. And we're always looking to learn as well. So toss it down in comments.
Jake, are you sticking with road tubeless?
100%.
I am never going back. I'm never going back to tubes in my road bikes.
How can it get better though?
If it was less messy,
yeah.
Or if they were easier to set up, that's how it could get better.
I'm sure they'll come up with something at some point in time. But until then, thank you for watching. We appreciate it. We'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.